For the last time this year, folks, welcome to Monster Monday. As we reflect on the year past and look towards the new one, I have a highly appropriate monster to present the interdimensional bounty hunter, the Jannite. Following on a little bit from last week, this monster doesn't entirely spring from my own mind. It was instead initially conceptualized by one of my brothers. We originally built the Jannite for Pathfinder 1st Edition, and have since lost it. I had to rebuild it. And the first idea behind it was a creature that feeds on the dimensional energy left behind by interplanar travel. Since then, we've workshopped it a little bit and restyled them more as interdimensional bounty hunters, capable of tracking targets across planes. For some more direct inspiration in regards to their designs, my brother took the original idea from Janus, a Roman god of beginnings, gates, transitions, and doorways, for whom the upcoming month of January is named after. Janus also possessed the two faces in opposite directions that we see in the design of the Jannite, which, I almost forgot to mention, is beautifully illustrated by my good buddy Seth Monster. Now, getting into a bit of the mechanics here, Jannites are a perfect fit for outsiders in 1st edition, but there isn't a typing as simple or straightforward as that in Pathfinder 2nd edition. I ended up settling on making them aberrations, representing their strangeness both in function and physiology. Its level of 11 is largely based on the sort of spells that I wanted it to have access to, but I also think it's a fun fit with the inspiration that Janus was. Level 11 is a transition between low level and high level, a sort of looking in both directions. Digging into the design of this dimensional danger, the Jannite is a nimble adversary that can attack from a range of angles. It uses a high dexterity to facilitate this, which is done in part because the Jannite does use the crystal spears it makes as thrown weapons, and it needs that higher dex to be more accurate with them. However, it still uses a moderate strength, so that it can put some more force behind those strikes, and also has a moderate wisdom to aid in its hunts, helping it track down prey attempting to stay out ahead of it. Its constitution, intelligence, and charisma are all low, as they are a bit less imperative in its overall design, not really playing into any particular part of its kit. Now, going back to that moderate wisdom, and the design idea that the Jannite is meant to be a hunter, it uses a high perception score, and also benefits from dark vision. But that is not its only sense. Jannites usually have to hunt their quarries across dimensions, and this teleportation sense is a massive part of that. This allows the Jannite to sense the use of teleportation abilities, as well as directions that they lead in, even across planes. And I have to admit, most of the time this ability is just going to be flavor, but I think it's still worth including, and I think it's a lot of fun to do so. Aside from that, the Jannite does have a decent number of skills, central of which is its extreme survival skill to help it better track its prey. Its high dexterity affords it a high acrobatics and stealth, both of which can help it in its function as a hunter, and its moderate strength leads to a moderate athletics. It can make use of this in its kit, but it isn't a core facet of it. Finally, it has low arcana and occultism skills because every teleportation spell is on both the arcane and the occult spell lists. When it comes to the defenses of these denizens between dimensions, the Jannite starts off with a high armor class, and on top of that, it has all-around vision. This is obviously based on its two-faced nature, making it so that enemies can't move into a flank against it, which, keep in mind, is the easiest way to make a creature off guard. While it does have this ability, it doesn't have any innate resistances or immunities, and thus settles into a comfortable, moderate pool of hit points. Between its high perception and all-around vision, the Jannite might honestly be a bit hard to get off guard, unless you have some sort of ability that can guarantee the effect. That might leave the players looking for some vulnerabilities in its saving throws, which consist of a low fortitude save, inspired by its low constitution, a moderate will save, hearkening to forced teleportation effects usually requiring a will save, and then a high reflex, since the Jannite does have that high dexterity that gives it a reason to be up there. While this all makes the Jannite's defenses honestly pretty simple, As we get into the strikes, we see that they aren't too much more complex either. It has a high attack bonus on its claws, which feature the agile and fatal traits to take advantage of that high bonus. And then it also has the finesse trait, which is a bit of a given on all of its strikes, so the damage on the claws here use a low value, because again it does have that very valuable agile and fatal. Now one final feature of this is the grab ability, which is really the Jannite's primary way of using its athletics. This might seem a bit odd, but is based on the Jannite grabbing its targets, that is trying to bounty hunt, and it does do something else with them, which we will look at when we get into its abilities. Outside of that, and honestly slightly more integral to the Jannite's design, is its crystal spear. I'm honestly not sure where my brother got the idea for these from, but they personally make me think of Blink's little crystals from X-Men. Whether used in melee or at range, they have a moderate attack bonus, and also deal moderate damage. Now you may also notice that these spears have this thing called impale, which sounds real nasty, and it can be. It is also an important aspect of their design, but one that we will, again, save for discussing when we get down to its abilities. And before we get into them, I want to take a quick look at the Jannite spells. These spells use a moderate DC, which is mainly there so that players have a DC to counteract, if they get the chance to, as none of them actually force a save from the enemies. Translocate is obviously important, and it gets the spell at will, whether it be the 4th rank or the 5th rank version. Blink Charge is a bit more of a combat focused spell, letting the Jannite flash into the fray, and its other two spells just buy further into its teleportation theme. I do have to acknowledge that Interplanar Teleport is a little bit beyond its level, but it is very in theme with the character, and it also matches with the idea that these things live between dimensions. So it needs a way to travel to various planes. Like I said, its spells don't need much more than a quick look, which means we can now finally get into the juicy parts of the Jannite's design. First off, as promised, we have to talk about the Jannite's Impale. This is a passive sort of effect that details a lot of actions. Firstly, whenever the Jannite successfully strikes a creature with its spear, it impales that creature on said spear. Typically, the Jannite might throw these, but in some cases it will be impaling a creature in melee, which means that the Jannite will have to then release the spear, if it wants to keep the creature impaled. Once a creature is impaled, it can end the effect with an easy little interact action. But, until it does, the Jannite can teleport to the impaled creature as a single action, and the impaled creature takes a -2 save against any effects with the teleportation trait. I actually originally only designed this to be a -1 penalty, but since the spear can be removed with a single action that doesn't require a check or anything of the sort, my test subjects actually convinced me to bump this up just a teensy bit. Now as a side note, because of this ability, the Jannite is going to be going through, or presumably losing, a lot of spears. So I actually added Manifest Spear to its arsenal, a manipulate action that essentially just lets it draw a spear from thin air, just forms it out of dimensional energy. But BB, I can hear you saying, the Jannite doesn't have any spells to take advantage of that impaled effect. But it, in fact, my dear listener, does. It has Dimensional Drag, which allows it to use Translocate while it has a creature grabbed. The idea behind the inclusion of this ability is the Jannite grabbing the target it's been hired to hunt down, and then porting out of there with its victim in tow. Though they do of course get a save against it. But this is far from the only effect that the Jannite can rely upon. It also has Rift Rend. This is obviously based on the Rend monster ability, at the very least in its requirements. The difference lies in the fact that this Rend is not just solely intended to deal damage, but instead, if the Jannite is able to land its 2 claw strikes, it can forcibly teleport a creature up to 30 feet away, unless that creature succeeds at a high DC will save to resist the effects. Now, there might be some concern about, what if there's a cliff within 20 feet and I teleport my players off of it? And to that I say, if you're watching the video this far in, you're probably the GM. So my suggestion is, don't do that. Don't make a cliff there. Or, if there has to be a glyph there, just don't teleport your players off of it. You don't have to play to kill your PCs. And I know most people get that. I sometimes get comments that make me think that people don't entirely get that that's not the point of the game. Anyway, moving on, the Jannite does have one final ability that not only benefits from the spear impaling a creature, but specifically requires it. As a reaction, when a Jannite is targeted by an attack or an effect that forces it to make a save, such as a fireball or something of that nature, it can use Hostile Juxtaposition. This forces an impaled creature within 30 feet to make a will save against a high DC, and should it fail, it suddenly finds itself swapped with a Jannite, and right in the way of whatever effect the Jannite was trying to avoid. This is a great trick to pull on your players who might not realize just what being impaled by a Jannite spear means, like I managed to do in the Monster Mash. Getting into some of the other aspects of the Jannite's kit, we look to represent its two-headed nature, and also let it get a bit more use out of this reaction with Foresight. This single action gives it an extra reaction and is heavily based on the rogue's preparation. Now, while this might seem like it provides too much protection to the Jannite, and hurts the party while it's at it, you also have to keep in mind that the characters can simply remove the spears that allow this effect to happen. It's not too hard to avoid it. In fact, talking about the Monster Mash again, the party would use their third action to remove spears from their nearby allies so that they couldn't be affected with effects like this. The final action in the Jannite's kit is Twin Strikes, a flourish to make 2 strikes as a single action. Now, these strikes do increase its multiple attack penalty, but not until after both strikes are made. This is a very potent effect for its level, but is again based on the dual-faced nature of the Jannite. It also has some importance in potentially allowing the Jannite to pull off something like Rift Rend when it's struggling to find the actions to do so. The final feature in this Fearsome Foes kit is Teleportation Tactics, a passive ability that actually originates from the Phase Room that I've designed in the past. It is a simple but handy little effect. Thematically, the Jannite is so used to weaving teleportation into its combat that it can flash around the battlefield and strike from completely unexpected angles, leaving enemies off guard to it. With all that said, I think we've pretty successfully covered the Jannite. Once tasked with taking a target, this teleporting Terminator tears through treacherous territories, teeming terrains, and terrifying turfs, tracking the team till they tire, and then taking them to task. This is a great enemy to throw at your players after they've gone on a plane-hopping adventure, and managed to make some enemies that they were able to give the slip. You could also run a gang of Jannites who have set up a sort of toll operation between dimensions, if you want to do something a bit different. But if you want to go even further than that, you might also run the Jannite as a full-on NPC that the heroes are approaching as a guide or possibly even a ferryman between realms. Though, maybe they need to help it catch a quarry before it will lend them its aid. My brother and I hope you like this monster, but whether you did or you didn't, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it down in the comments, along with what other monsters you'd like to see. On that topic, you can check out the bevy of beasts I've already made here on the channel, or over on the Monster Monday blog, Twitter, or Discord, which are linked in the description. Thanks for watching, and have a happy new year.